feeling lost in a loud world. Here's the compass you were never taught to use. There comes a point in every life where noise no longer feels like connection. You scroll, you search, you reach, but still feel a quiet ache beneath it all. In a world overflowing with advice, content, and solutions, why do so many of us still feel like we're drifting? The more we chase direction outside of ourselves, the more we seem to lose sight of something deeper. Not because we are broken, but because we were never taught to listen inward. What if you were born with a compass, a map etched into the soul, hidden beneath layers of conditioning, culture, and survival? Carl Jung didn't just study the psyche, he studied the soul. Beneath the surface of therapy and analysis, he uncovered a spiritual architecture for human life. One that doesn't offer shortcuts, but something far more enduring, a way to become whole. His work wasn't just about solving problems, it was about uncovering meaning, about seeing that everything we run from, our fears, our failures, our forgotten dreams, holds a sacred key to becoming who we truly are. This isn't the kind of wisdom you find in textbooks or trending self-help tips. It's older than language, buried deep in symbols, stories, and archetypes we all carry, whether we know it or not. And the most astonishing part? These truths aren't reserved for philosophers or mystics. They belong to you. They live in your patterns, your pain, your quiet longing for something real, something lasting. In this video, we're not here to talk about how to fix your life. We're here to remember how to live it. We'll explore 7 rules that Jung uncovered, rules most people never learn, yet they hold the power to transform how you walk through the world. These are not rules in the strict sense, but living principles. They are invitations to stop performing and start becoming. Each one is a mirror, reflecting a part of your inner world that may have been forgotten, silenced, or misunderstood. And once you start to see clearly, everything begins to shift. Because this is not a journey of striving, it is a journey of remembering. It is about peeling back the layers and returning to the self that has always been there, quiet, patient, and waiting. So if you've ever felt like you're doing everything right and still feel something is missing, this is for you. If you've ever longed for direction that doesn't pull you further away from your truth, you're not alone. This is your invitation to walk a different path. One that doesn't promise perfection but wholeness. One that doesn't demand more effort but more honesty. Let these 7 rules be your compass. Your real life begins here. It often begins as something small, a moment when someone interrupts you and you brush it off with a smile, even though something in your chest tightened. Or a time when you hear praise directed at someone else and for a brief second feel invisible. These moments pass, but they leave traces. And if left unexamined, those traces collect in the dark corners of your psyche, silently scripting how you show up in the world. Carl Jung called this collection of hidden emotions, suppressed desires, and disowned traits the shadow. It is not evil. It is not wrong. It is simply the part of you that had no place to go when you were learning how to be accepted. Every time you were told, "Don't cry, don't be angry," or "That's not nice," a part of you quietly retreated underground. And yet, these buried parts didn't disappear. They grew roots in your unconscious and began shaping your reactions, your relationships, and even your sense of self-worth. Many people think they are free simply because they are outwardly calm. But true peace is not the absence of emotion, it is its integration. The person who never expresses anger often becomes resentful in silence. The one who prides themselves on being endlessly generous may secretly feel used and unappreciated. And the one who avoids conflict at all costs may find themselves living a life that feels like someone else's script. This is where the shadow operates. Quietly, invisibly but powerfully. Facing the shadow means stepping into emotional honesty. It means admitting that the parts of you you've rejected are not your enemies. They are your teachers. The rage you hide may actually be the key to your boundaries. The jealousy you suppress might be pointing to a part of your soul that is starving for attention. The shame you carry could be a signal that your inner child was silenced long before they could speak their truth. Real healing begins when you stop shaming these parts and start listening to them. Take the story of a man in his 40s who always felt the need to be the rock for everyone around him. He never cried. He never admitted when he was overwhelmed. But beneath that strong exterior lived a terrified boy who had to grow up too fast. It wasn't until he began shadow work, journaling through his triggers, revisiting memories with compassion, and speaking his truth without apology, that he began to feel something new, emotional freedom. Shadow work is not a one-time ritual. It's a lifelong dialogue between who you've been told to be and who you really are. And the truth is, you cannot become whole without the parts you've hidden. You cannot be fully alive without reclaiming what you once buried to survive. So ask yourself gently, what have I been avoiding? What part of me is still waiting to be seen? Because the moment you face the shadow is the moment you begin to live in the light. There comes a moment in every life when the mask starts to suffocate. You've smiled when you didn't feel joy, nodded in agreement to avoid the tension, carried the weight of being the strong one, the nice one, the responsible one, so long that you forgot there was a real self beneath the performance. You followed the rules, met the expectations, and still found yourself asking, why does my life feel so hollow? This is not failure. It is the soul whispering that the role you're playing is no longer your truth. Jung called this moment the call to individuation, the courageous process of becoming who you really are, not who you were told to be. It is the inner rebellion that says, I can no longer betray myself for belonging. And this isn't easy. Because the cost of fitting in was your aliveness, but the cost of becoming authentic might be the approval you were once addicted to. Many people fear that if they stop people-pleasing, they'll be abandoned. But what if the real abandonment has already happened? The kind where you abandon yourself, little by little, to keep others comfortable. Take the story of a woman in her 50s, who always believed her value came from being accommodating. She was the one everyone turned to, always saying yes, always suppressing her own needs. But behind the smile was chronic exhaustion, silent resentment, and a quiet grief for a self she had never fully lived. Her turning point came the day she cancelled a family gathering, not out of anger, but out of a deep inner knowing that she needed rest. For the first time, she chose herself. And something radical happened. Her world didn't fall apart. It started to realign. Choosing authenticity will disrupt familiar dynamics. People may question the new you, challenge your decisions, or call you selfish. But the truth is, when you stop performing, the people meant for you will stop performing too. Your courage becomes permission for others to be real. Individuation is not about rejecting the world. It is about finally joining it as someone whole. It means no longer hiding your dreams to stay agreeable. It means honoring your body when it says no, even when others expect yes. It means speaking your truth softly, even if your voice shakes, because your silence has cost you enough. And it is in these small, consistent acts of inner alignment that you begin to feel it, the quiet return of your own presence, the sacred reunion with the one you were before the world told you who to be. So ask yourself with love, not judgment, in what ways am I still performing? Who am I afraid to disappoint? And what would it feel like to be free? Because becoming who you are is not the end of your journey. It is where life finally begins to feel like your own. Sometimes, the patterns in your life are so persistent that they begin to feel like fate. You keep falling in love with unavailable partners. You overextend yourself in relationships that don't nourish you. You sacrifice your dreams to avoid rocking the boat. And no matter how many times you tell yourself, next time will be different, the script stays the same. But what if the reason you feel stuck isn't because you're broken, it's because you're playing out a role that was written long before you were aware of it? Carl Jung believed that we each carry universal characters within us, known as archetypes. These are ancient psychic blueprints. The mother, the warrior, the martyr, the rebel, the savior, that whisper instructions to our unconscious, shaping how we think, feel, and behave. They are not inherently good or bad, but when they remain unseen, they can quietly possess us. Take, for instance, the story of a man in his early 40s who spent his life overachieving to earn his father's approval. No matter how much he accomplished, it never felt enough. Beneath his drive was the unexamined hero archetype, obsessed with proving worth through conquest. But what began as ambition slowly turned into burnout, strained relationships, and a deep fear of rest. Because to rest meant to risk being seen as weak. When he finally looked inward, he saw the pattern. He wasn't chasing success. He was trying to become worthy of love. This is how archetypes operate. They are myths written into the nervous system. They guide your inner voice, filter your perception of others, and repeat stories that no longer serve your growth. A woman stuck in the rescuer archetype may confuse love with saving others. A man trapped in the victim archetype may find comfort in powerlessness, avoiding responsibility while longing for change. But here is the healing truth. When you recognize the archetype, you reclaim the pen. The moment you name the story you've been living, you create space for a new one. You can thank the caretaker for how she protected you, then invite in the sovereign who sets sacred boundaries. You can honor the hero's grit, then allow the lover to teach you presence. Archetypes are not cages. They are mirrors. And once you see what is being reflected, you are free to choose how you move forward. You are not just your name, your habits, or your past. You are a soul, carrying generations of memory, myth, and meaning. But you are also the conscious witness who can decide which parts to carry and which to lay down. So ask yourself, what role have I been playing? And more importantly, who am I ready to become? There comes a point in life when logic no longer explains the way things unfold. You think of someone and they call. A book falls off a shelf with the exact words you needed to hear. A series of delays leads you to meet a person who completely alters your direction. These moments are easy to dismiss as coincidence, until they start weaving together like constellations pointing to something deeper. Carl Jung called this synchronicity. It is not superstition, it is soul language. Consider a woman in her 50s who had stayed in a lifeless marriage for decades. She didn't leave because there was no dramatic abuse or betrayal, just the quiet erosion of herself. The spark was gone, the connection faded, and the life she had built felt like a house with no doors. One evening, while visiting a bookstore she hadn't planned on entering, she picked up a book on emotional rebirth. On the first page was a sentence she had written in her journal 12 years earlier, word for word. Her hands trembled, and something ancient stirred. It was the first of many synchronicities that arrived in the months to follow. A stranger in a coffee shop shared a story that mirrored hers. A podcast episode randomly played, detailing the exact kind of emotional detachment she had normalized. Signs were everywhere, not instructing her to run, but inviting her to wake up. Synchronicity is not a guarantee of outcomes. It is a mirror of alignment. It reveals when your inner world is beginning to harmonize with your external one. These moments are not designed to control you, but to support you in making conscious choices. They are breadcrumbs from the unconscious, reminding you that something larger is walking with you. Healing begins when you stop needing every answer to come from your rational mind. Some truths are too sacred to arrive through logic. They come through whispers, symbols, and moments of impossible timing. The more present you become, the more you start to notice the sacred choreography. Life stops feeling like a disconnected series of events and begins to feel like a dance of intention. Jung believed that synchronicity reveals the unity of psyche and matter. In simpler terms, it means your inner clarity magnetizes outer clarity. Your willingness to listen inward begins attracting what your soul has been silently asking for. But if you are too distracted, too logical, too busy proving instead of receiving, you will miss the gold hiding in plain sight. So the next time something uncanny happens, pause. Ask what it might be reflecting. Ask where your soul is trying to get your attention. Sometimes, the universe does not shout. It just rearranges the world around you to see if you're awake enough to notice. Not all wisdom comes from books. Some of it rises uninvited in the middle of the night. It shows up as a recurring dream, a powerful symbol, or a sudden creative impulse that refuses to leave you alone. Carl Jung believed that we are not born as blank slates. Instead, we carry within us a silent inheritance, a blueprint of archetypal knowledge passed down through generations. He called this the collective unconscious, and if you learn how to listen, it becomes a living guide. Imagine a man in his early 60s, newly retired after decades in finance. For most of his life, he believed success meant logic, planning, and numbers. But once the meetings stopped and the noise faded, he found himself restless. At night, he began having vivid dreams of walking through ancient forests and standing at the edge of rivers he didn't recognize, but somehow knew. One morning, he woke with an image so clear it moved him to tears. A child offering him a lantern in the dark. It haunted him, in a good way. With no experience in art, he began painting what he saw in his dreams. Months later, he created an entire gallery of mythic imagery. When asked about it, he said, "I didn't create this. I remembered it." That is the power of the collective unconscious. It speaks through images, instincts, and intuitive nudges. It is the inner well from which all great art, stories, and breakthroughs have emerged. And it is not reserved for mystics or geniuses. It is within you too. This rule invites you to reconnect with the forgotten parts of your own psyche. Begin with the symbols that repeatedly visit you. What animals show up in your dreams? What patterns do you notice in the books or films you're drawn to? These are not random preferences, they are messages from something deeper than thought. To heal through this wisdom, you must give yourself permission to explore what does not yet make sense. Creative expression is often the first doorway. Write what you feel but cannot explain. Draw what you see when you close your eyes. Journal the recurring dreams you usually dismiss. The more you engage with these symbols, the more they reveal. Healing is not always linear. Sometimes it is symbolic. Sometimes your soul sends you a metaphor because your conscious mind is not yet ready for the full truth. Jung once said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But to do that, you must remember what your ancestors already knew. You must awaken the dormant wisdom within you. The next time something stirs your soul and you do not know why, pause. It might not be confusing, it might be memory. There comes a moment in every life when the noise of expectation no longer drowns out the whisper of the soul. It often arrives quietly, like a question you cannot ignore. Is this really who I am? For many, this question emerges not in moments of triumph but in stillness, after the striving has worn thin. Beneath the roles we play, the wounds we carry, and the rules we inherited, lies something more original, more ancient, and far more alive. Jung called this the self, the unshakable core of who you truly are, and it waits patiently beneath the masks. Consider a woman in her late 40s who had spent her entire adult life caring for others. She was a devoted mother, a loyal wife, and a steady employee. But somewhere along the way, her identity dissolved into obligation. She could no longer answer simple questions like, "What do you love?" or "What do you need?" One evening, after years of dismissing her own desires, she signed up for a pottery class on a whim. At first she felt foolish, like she didn't belong, but the moment her hands touched clay, something opened. The more she shaped the earth, the more she remembered herself. Not the caretaker, not the woman others expected her to be, but the one who once dreamed, once felt, once created. That quiet act of saying yes to something that felt like joy was the beginning of her return. This is the essence of answering the call. It rarely begins with grand gestures. It often starts with the smallest decision, to choose truth over performance, stillness over speed, or soul over script. The self does not shout. It nudges. It speaks through exhaustion when you're chasing the wrong life. It tugs at your heart when you're near what feels right. It reveals itself in moments when your presence deepens and time slows down. To awaken the self, you must become curious about what you've been told to suppress. The conditioning that taught you to be polite instead of powerful. The wounds that told you it is safer to shrink than to shine. The personas that helped you survive but no longer let you thrive. Healing begins when you gently peel back those layers, not to destroy who you were, but to remember who you are. And when the self begins to lead, everything shifts. Decisions feel clearer. Relationships become more honest. Creativity flows without force. You begin responding to life instead of reacting to it. This is not about becoming someone new. It is about coming home to the one you were before the world taught you to forget. There is a calling within you that no one else can answer. It does not demand attention. It simply waits for your yes. Sometimes the greatest turning points in life do not come with clarity, they come with contradiction. You want freedom, yet you fear the unknown. You long to be seen, yet you hide your most vulnerable truths. You crave rest, yet keep running from silence. These inner opposites are not mistakes. They are the raw material of transformation. Carl Jung called the process of holding these tensions without collapse the transcendent function. It is not about choosing one side or suppressing the other. It is about letting the friction between opposites give birth to something entirely new. Think of a man in his 50s who has spent decades striving for external success. On paper, his life looks complete, but behind the accolades he feels hollow. Whenever he slows down, unease rises. He doesn't know how to rest without guilt or how to be without doing. One evening, after a health scare, he finally sits still long enough to feel what surfaces is not weakness, but grief. Grief over the years led him to abandon himself to the chase. Grief over never having known his true desires beyond achievement. At first he tries to push it away, but slowly he lets the emotions speak. And in that space between his drive and his despair, something new begins to emerge. He doesn't stop working entirely, but he no longer lets ambition be the sole compass. He starts painting on weekends, taking walks without his phone, calling old friends without an agenda. He finds a new rhythm, one shaped by wholeness rather than performance. This is the alchemy Jung spoke of. The fusion of the conscious and unconscious creates more than resolution. It creates evolution. The pain you once tried to outrun becomes a doorway. The parts of you that once fought for dominance begin to collaborate. The rigid becomes fluid. The scattered becomes centered. And in that sacred middle ground, a deeper self awakens. Healing does not mean never feeling broken again. It means becoming the one who knows how to hold the pieces. When you learn to stand at the threshold between who you were and who you are becoming, you stop fearing contradiction. You welcome it. Because you now understand that tension is not a sign of failure. It is the fire that refines you. Your suffering is not wasted. It contains patterns, messages, and meanings waiting to be integrated. Every breakdown has the potential to become a breakthrough. Every fragment, once embraced, becomes part of your mosaic. And the more you practice this inner alchemy, the more your life becomes a living symbol of transformation itself. This is not about fixing yourself. It is about freeing yourself. And the moment you stop resisting your pain and begin listening to its wisdom, you cross the threshold. You become the alchemist of your own soul. You have just crossed a threshold, not into certainty, but into something far more sacred, your own unfolding. These 7 rules are not rigid doctrines to follow, they are living invitations. Each one asks you to slow down, listen deeper, and remember what the noise of the world made you forget. Your life was never meant to be a performance. It was meant to be a pilgrimage. Carl Jung did not offer quick fixes or easy steps. He pointed us toward the mystery, toward the inner terrain most people spend a lifetime avoiding. He spoke to the courageous few who were ready to stop chasing approval and start seeking truth. And that truth is this: you were never broken. You were layered, hidden, conditioned. These rules are simply mirrors. They reflect back the parts of you that are ready to rise. Maybe you are now realizing how much of your life has been spent performing roles that no longer fit. Or perhaps you have touched a pain so deep that you can finally hear what it was trying to teach you. Maybe a dream has returned, a forgotten self, a voice you silenced long ago that is now whispering, "Begin again." That whisper is not random. It is your soul speaking through the cracks. This is where transformation truly begins. Not in the knowing, but in the living. Integrating the shadow, honoring the archetypes. Trusting synchronicity. Listening to your dreams. Saying yes to the self that has waited patiently beneath the masks. These are not one-time revelations, they are daily rituals. And like any sacred practice, they require reverence, repetition, and a deep willingness to walk the path, even when it feels unclear. But you are not alone. The very moment you choose to live aligned with your inner truth, the world around you begins to respond. Relationships shift, synchronicities increase. Old wounds lose their grip. And slowly, you begin to feel it, not perfection, but peace. A peace that comes not from control, but from congruence. You are finally living from the inside out. So here is your next step. In the comments below, share which rules spoke to your soul the loudest, and why. Let us create a conscious circle of seekers, truth-tellers, and alchemists who are not afraid to evolve out loud. Your story might be the permission someone else needs to begin, because in the end, this was never about becoming someone new. It was always about returning to who you really are. You were not meant to follow someone else's path. You were meant to create your own. Let these 7 rules be your compass. The journey is yours now. If this message stirred something inside you, don't stop here. The next video will take you deeper into healing, growth, and self-discovery. It might just be the breakthrough your soul has been waiting for. Tap into it now. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and join a community committed to truth, transformation, and real inner change. You're not alone on this path. I'll meet you in the following video, where we continue becoming who we were always meant to be.